Howdy, it's Kyle with another installment of Examining Interesting Maps. This is part 10 in the series and the second to feature viewer-made maps. I'll leave links in the description to all of the other videos in the series, but for this one, every map you're going to see is one made by a viewer of the channel, so let's see what they were able to come up with. Okay, so this first map was done by Dan B. It was done by using GIS software. And this is an interactive map that shows current and proposed non-motorized trails and paths along Cape Cod in Massachusetts. So far there hasn't been much completed, but if all of these proposed trails come to fruition, this would be a pretty cool network. So even though the total number of paths isn't very large, this is a fairly small area, so you could traverse basically the entire Cape on foot or bike or whatever and not have to get on any kind of highway or even deal with cars at all. This map with a logon and password, you can go in and not modify it, but you can go in and look at it interactively, zoom in and do all kinds of cool stuff with this. But yeah, Dan B, thank you very much for this map of non-motorized paths on Cape Cod. And keeping it in the Bay State is this map done by Ian K, which shows the big extent of Dunkin' Donuts in Massachusetts. So the vast majority of the Massachusetts population lives in one of these pink areas, so the vast majority live pretty close to a Dunkin'. And whenever I'm driving around in the Northeast, I think it's just very interesting how many Dunkin' Donuts there are in the entire region. So overall, this is a very well done map. I like the way the pink contrasts with the green on there, so thank you very much, Ian. This is a very nice looking map done by Eric P. that shows a different take on worldwide temperature distribution. So what this looks at is not just the mean temperature or average temperature of an area, because you can have somewhere that's quite mild where the average temperature was always around 60, or somewhere that's got extreme temperatures but it still averages about 60. So what this one does is takes a look at not just the median temperature, but how far the poles are, I guess you could say, in those ends of the temperature extremes. So in desert areas, like you can see right in the middle of the map in northern Africa, the Sahara, the southwestern US, northern and western Australia, these are desert areas where you have really high temperatures in the summer and quite low temperatures in the winter. And you can see in the more polar areas, and as well as the Himalayas, more gray and blue. And these are areas that have a fairly wide extreme between high and low temperatures, just much lower than the desert areas. And with how it's presented, it almost looks like a watercolor painting. And so the combination of what this map shows, just how well it's presented with the colors and the gradient, this is a very well done map, although I do think it needs a title. Still, really good map, Eric. Thank you very much. Here's another map about climate. This one's done by James C. and shows the sunniest counties in the western US. So that parts around southwestern Arizona are where you have the largest number of days with sunshine. And it's a little hard to tell, but you can see the far southwestern county in Arizona is a little bit of a different color. It's kind of a puce, I guess. And that is Yuma County, and Yuma, Arizona is the sunniest city in the US. And at the other end of the spectrum are the green counties. So these are affected by the marine layer, and the Cascade Mountains go north-south at the eastern end of these counties. So east of that, you have more rain shadow and more sunshine, but then you get to the more high elevations once you get a little more interior, northern Idaho, western Montana, more clouds. So this is a nice map that shows good data, although I have to say I wouldn't have used the clip art for it. I think it adds an unnecessary busyness to the map, but the map itself does look pretty good. So thank you, James. And here's a really interesting map done by Lawrence D. And this shows exactly what the title says, how the states would border each other if they had perfect rectangular borders. So for example, Maine is the only state in the country that borders only one other state. So you'll see Maine there just bordering New Hampshire. So no matter what state you go to, it's going to border all the states it actually does, but just in rectangular form. So Missouri and Tennessee right in the middle are the two states that each border 8, and you can count the 8 states that border each of those two. So this is a very well done map. It's very interesting. I'm not sure about the practical use for it, but it does look pretty cool. And the creator of this map originally did it by hand, and here's another one that the same creator sent to me. This is a hand-drawn map that he made for his kids, and he purposefully did not put a legend on it because he wanted his kids to figure out what the colors and numbers on the map meant. And that might be the only legitimate reason for not putting a legend on a map. But what this shows is kind of like what his previous map shows, and that's how many states border these states. So the color is representative of how many states it borders. So Maine in the Northeast has 1. It's the only state that borders 1. And then the 2 blue states in the middle, Tennessee and Missouri, are the ones that border 8. And when I do geography questions on the street, a lot of them have to do with borders. So I think Lawrence would do pretty well on those questions. Thanks a lot, man, for sending these. The next two maps I'm going to show you are made from a website called mapchart.net. This map was made by Card Elf and shows what it says, bike access on the highways by state. And although the legend doesn't say it, I do believe it's for interstates and for freeways, not just for regular state highways. So as you can see, a really interesting correlation here with basically the entire eastern US saying no bikes on the freeways and the west being, yeah, it's okay. I'm not sure the reason for this, but my hypothesis would be just fewer roads in the west and more cyclists have to use the freeways and other main highways. But thank you, Card Elf, for this map. This is another map done on the same map chart website. This one's done by Jason W. and shows theme parks across the US. The creator of this map is a huge fan of theme parks, has worked at some in the past, and put the data together for this map. And if you're wondering what roller coaster credits are, these are just the number of roller coasters, and people online keep track of which ones they've been on. I guess after a couple of hundred you could lose track, but this one shows how many you have in each state. I find it interesting that there are 16 in California. I certainly couldn't name that many, and I'm also surprised that there are only 12 in Florida. So this is a nice map that shows some interesting data, but my one critique would be for the states that don't have any roller coasters, I wouldn't use those dashed lines. So I would have used the gray that's used for New Jersey for those states that have no roller coasters. And with New Jersey being the only one that would be in whatever color, you can use a much brighter or louder color because it would cover such a small area. But either way, nice map. Thank you very much, Jason. This is a map done by Parker C. It's very busy and there's a lot to take in, but what it tries to do is show a correlation between the number of bars in a state and the percentage of fatal car accidents in that state that have to do with drunk driving. And this is related to some research that shows in dry counties in some parts of the country where you have more DUI accidents because people are having to drive farther to get to a bar or to buy beer at a store. And although this map looks very good and there was a lot of work that goes into it, you may have heard the phrase correlation does not mean causation. So this map is looking for correlation, and even if there is a strong correlation between the number of bars and the number of DUI accidents, it doesn't mean the number of bars is the reason for that. Because honestly, the first thing I see when you say that New York has the state with the lowest fatalities per capita, the first thing I think is that most people in New York live in the city, and although you're going to have a lot of accidents there, urban speeds are going to be much slower. You can't go 80 miles an hour in the street, so there might be more minor accidents, but much fewer fatality ones. And other states have a lot more ice and snow and poor road conditions. Others have a lot of deer jumping out in front of you. So I don't want to be overly critical of this map in particular, just the general concept of even if you do have a correlation between two things, that doesn't mean that's why. So Parker, I know a lot of work went into this map and it looks really nice. Thank you for sending it to me. These next two maps were created by Max in Google My Maps. The first one will be for North America and the second one is for Europe, and what they show is the distribution of birthplaces of current players in the NHL. So each logo you see on there is where a player from that team was born. So the first thing you might see is that giant cluster of logos between Detroit and Quebec City. And almost perfectly paralleling at a smaller degree is the Northeast megalopolis. And when you go up into Canada, in the north central part of this map where you see that line of logos is basically the main highway that connects some of the biggest cities between Manitoba and Saskatchewan. But then you go to the European map, and I find this much more interesting. You can essentially see the outlines of Sweden, Czechia, and Switzerland on this map. And this just shows very clearly just how much more popular hockey is in Sweden and Finland as opposed to Norway. And this creator Max did maps like this also for the NBA for basketball, but I do think for hockey it shows much more interesting geographic distribution because you can see just how popular hockey is in Czechia and against Sweden and Finland, but how it's not really popular at all in, say, Poland or Romania. So these are very nice maps, but because they were done in Google My Maps, if you're not the creator, you don't really have much access to, zoom in and interact too much with it, but still a very good map. Thanks a lot, Max. This map was done by Tom M. and shows the household income distribution in Palm Beach County, Florida, which is the county just north of Broward, which is Fort Lauderdale, which is just north of Miami. One of the first things that stood out to me when I saw this map is that I would have expected basically the entire coastal areas along the beach to be more of the high income spots. And you can see the highest incomes are in fact along the beach, but many of the areas right there along the coast are some of the lower incomes. I'm not familiar enough with the details of Palm Beach County to know why that is, but you do seem to have a lot of the lower incomes to be closer to the coast and some of the higher incomes in the blue. I know oftentimes in the South, some of the coastal areas are very swampy and not very desirable in terms of a good spot to be on the beach. And maybe those are more low-lying areas, more susceptible to major hurricane damage. But nonetheless, very interesting to see the income distribution throughout the county. This particular map I was sent is lower resolution, so I'm sure there's a higher resolution version of it. But still, the data are good. The presentation with the colors is pretty good too. So thank you very much, Tom, for sending me this map. And the last one that I'm going to show is my favorite one for this video, and that is this one done by Hazel. So the first thing you think when you see this is, wow, this is a beautiful map. So as you can see, it shows what it says, the geology of South Dakota, and the different colors are a different type of underlying rock, whether it be igneous or sedimentary or metamorphic. And so this is a very detailed map from a geology perspective, but just the way it's presented looks beautiful. So Hazel did the data and the putting together of the map, but the watercolor style is from John Nelson Maps. And then from a getting into the details perspective, you can see just the mountainous and the more badland part of the state in the west and southwest is much more varied, where you get to the eastern half of the state that's much more uniform. So overall, I would say this map is basically perfect. There's nothing really you could do with it to make it better. It just looks very, very nice. The only, I guess, critique I would have is you probably wouldn't use this map style in a professional setting if you were doing a big presentation for Congress about the geology of South Dakota for whatever reason. You probably wouldn't use this style. You might use a more traditional mapping style, but you'd want this to be framed and hanging up in your office. But beautiful map, done wonderfully. Thank you very much, Hazel. So there you have it, part 10 of examining interesting maps, and there were some really nice ones included in this video. If you would like to submit a map for consideration for the next video in the series, you can go to my channel homepage, and under About is the contact link, and you can send me your map from there. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in learning more about geography from a nerd. So yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King, signing out. I'd like to give a special thanks to my superior patrons for their support. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can check out my Patreon page with the link in the description. And as always, thank you very much.